Welcome to your awakening. Please take care as your reality is adjusted.
Don't click the button so quick. End up replaying it. Yeah, doing well tonight already. Stop screen share. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Not muted, okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. Or if you're in the UK, it's evening. If you're in that GMT zone, it's evening. But welcome, well met, salutations, hail, greetings, hello, all that hello stuff, yes, in different languages. Jumbo, Jahoy, is it Jaho? Yeah, hello. Welcome back again, folks. Another edition of Excalibre, another edition of trying to get everything on the screen at the same time so I can see what I'm doing on this moon day evening, on the 13th of the 1st, 2020, the year of vision, the first 13 in the year of vision. And the first 2 weeks of this year have been quite interesting. The last weekend has been very interesting. There's been a lot happening over the last week. I'd put it sort of a encapsulation in the description as a subtitle this week. I'll try and explain why I think there's connections between them, like I usually do, but just to read it out in case people aren't looking at the screen. The subtitle this week: The Prince, the President, the Plane and the Plant. I thought I could add some others to that as well, but that was long enough. That was like a long enough sentence just like that. It demonstrates some of the connections between a lot of the stuff that's been going on over the weekend. So I'm multitasking at the same time. And because I'm a man, I'm terrible at it, supposedly, allegedly. But no, just rearranging windows and closing other windows. Hello to everyone in the chat. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining in. And I've got to say, hello, Paula B. If people are willing to pay that much for a candle that smells of some actress's privates, then I'm sure there's going to be lots for sale on eBay soon for like a tenner or 20 quid. You know, if you just want a candle that smells of fanny, I'm sure people can provide that for you. That's the level of crazy stupid in some of the parts of the media that's going on at the moment. Yes, you can buy a candle that smells like a celebrity's bits. How would you know? You know, they could have just dipped it in a can full of tuna or something. How would you know? Sorry, it's just too silly. Scrolling down. David Woodings, hello. Oh, Dave Iron, hello. Right, okay, I get you. Change of name. And John Beckett, hello. And Lewis Alexander Grimmer, hello. Charlie Manson is coming back, is he? Oh dear. And Lynn Anderson, hello. Thanks for joining in. I think my chat room's up to date so far. It's been a busy weekend, and I'm sure it's going to be a busy week. There's a lot of shows going on tonight, I know. I've sent an invite out to Jeff. If he sees it, if he's got the chance to jump in, that's great. But I know he'll be doing his own show as well in a bit. So we shall see how things develop. Like some Tatro, hello. I saw you just jump in the chat room. Yeah. As the general planetary activity has been ticking over, we'll mention that. I'll come back to that right at the end, basically, to sort of point at that potentiality of the times they are changing, and there is a tumultuous period going on at the moment. So a lot of things seem to be up in the air and in turmoil. Radical changes are happening. I've talked a lot over the years and within the past few months especially, that this time period is a major period when things are being changed. A lot of the things we're often talking about, the infrastructure for those things have already been set up and put in place. Now they're starting to turn things on. So, for example, the high-speed internet, that, you know, allegedly 5G. I'm saying allegedly because some of the places can't prove that they're actually reaching that signal strength, that frequency to truly be 5G. But whatever, they'll keep ticking it up and ticking it up. They'll get there eventually and beyond, possibly. But things like that, stuff is being turned on. There's major changes going on in the general structure and infrastructure of the way our societies work on a national level. You know, each country and the way each country works, there are governments getting turned over or going through major periods of upheaval and change. A lot of hung parliaments and coalition governments and things like that happening. And then, of course, you've got the international situation where everything is quite chaotic, or many things are quite chaotic. I shouldn't really say everything, just to be accurate. A lot of things are very chaotic, and the true state of anarchy that governs the international stage, that's certainly the theatre presentation that we're shown. You know, that all these different nations are competing with each other, and they might form little groups to help themselves, like NATO and the BRICS nations and whatever. They might form these little alliances and groups, but in effect what you're being presented with is that on the theatre stage as a whole, it's a state of anarchy where they're all competing with each other, and there is no singular ruler that sits on top of them like a monarchy, or there is no singular government that is controlling them all or governing them all like the UN. Oh, no, it's all just these different nations and alliances competing with each other. If it's so, and I'm using the word anarchy in the generally presented definition as it's shown to the public most of the time, certainly has been for a long time, probably nigh on a century, they've been portraying this concept of anarchy equals chaos. Or whenever anybody uses the word anarchy, what they're actually meaning is chaos, or loss of order, loss of the current order, the status quo is falling apart, etc. Whereas that's not really the accurate definition of it. But I'm using it in that general modern redefined version at the moment. The international stage is presented to us as if it is a massive anarchist activity where these nations are competing with each other, supposedly because they want to care for their own populace. So we need to go and take the oil from some other country so that we can keep our population moving in their petroleum-powered cars, allegedly, and selling them petroleum-based pharmaceuticals. That's part of the oil industry argument that often people miss. People are so concentrated, or they're taught to be concentrated on petroleum and the production of energy directly, i.e. vehicles and generating stations and stuff like that. But the oil industry has its threads leading into lots of other areas of society, such as a good proportion, a good majority of pharmaceutical chemicals that are sold to you as medication are based on oil, petroleum products. That's the basis that they work from. And then they mess with the chemical structure and such like to produce this synthesized chemical that is part of the pharmaceutical, blah, blah, blah. There's other areas of society where it's included as well, you know, plastic production and blah, loads of stuff anyway. Yeah, a stage that is seemingly one of anarchy. But if it was truly anarchy, how can there be these uncomfortably saturated coincidences? I'm saying uncomfortably saturated because there are so many of these coincidences that it starts to become an uncomfortable dissonance to keep accepting them as coincidence. Because it's like, hang on a minute, right? You're saying that happened and then that happened and that happened, but it's all just coincidence. And yet they so perfectly fit a scripted narrative that suits an agenda that gets one particular group more power in a particular area. No, it starts to stretch credibility to keep calling these things coincidence. So I'm going to talk about some stuff that may on the surface just seem coincidental, but I don't think they are coincidental. And I think once you start to see these kind of connections, then that illusion of the chaos of the international theatre starts to fall away to a large degree. I'll say this caveat now. I'm not suggesting that everything that happens in the world is all orchestrated or scripted. I'm not suggesting that what happens in the majority of the international theatre is orchestrated or scripted. Most of it is just the background events and effects that are caused by the day-to-day and month after month running of our societal systems. They're just the turning of the cog that keep the whole machine rolling forward. But you don't need to manage every little event. You don't need to manage every atom of data that is moving round to be able to influence the general flow of events. A well-placed occurrence, a well-placed action can cause the flow to change direction. So they don't need to control everything. They don't need to stage everything. Not everything is a hoax. That is a deliberate misdirection that is put into this environment, put out across the media, because it pushes people into that dismissal thinking where they hear what somebody's suggesting, they just go, oh, you think everything is a hoax, dismiss everything you say. There's a lot of these kind of techniques that are used for the same reasoning. They pile a big load of shit onto an element of truth so that people looking at it just see a big pile of shit and dismiss it and walk away. They don't do the digging. They don't look for any confirmation or any correlating connection to support that original evidence, that original truth. They get to their vision is filled up with just a pile of poo that's on top of the truth. And we're taught often, we're entrained to be obsessed about those poo elements, which is why so many people love the drama. You know, when you're constantly subliminally told that you're just little old you, your life is meaningless because you're not one of those celebrities that we tell you are like demigods that you should worship and clone your life after. No, you're just little old you running around your little hamster wheel life, doing your day-to-day, just trying to survive and get by. So you're just little. You're minuscule compared to the big stage play that's occurring. So if you think what they're presenting to you, that you can pick through it and somehow figure it out, and therefore you have some kind of power in this. No, you're just little old you. Don't bother, looking at this stuff with that kind of questioning mind, and just continue looking at the big pile of shit. Because if you're just little old you and your life is pretty much vacuous and meaningless, because that's what we keep telling you, because you're not a celebrity, you're not a politician or a king or a prince. No, you're just little old you. So the things that you do in your life are pretty meaningless. Do you really think that this stuff is meant to be understood or comprehended by you? No, it's not. If you think that your influence in the environment has the ability to change the course of action, like I said, they don't need to control everything, just a few things here and there, then you are mistaken. That's the way they present it to you. You know, your involvement is just as an audience member. So because your life is so empty, you know, there's no real major purpose, you're not changing the world, you're not influencing reality, no, then what can you do with your life energy? Oh, well, you know, you can bitch with each other about who's got the best set of clothing, or who's got the best lawn, or who's got the best this, that, or the other, or who's the most woke, who's the most morally righteous, who's this, that, and the other. And you taught to have these little competition stages with each other. So a vast majority of people end up just bickering about fairly meaningless stuff, because, and I say meaningless because it's all part of an illusion that is nothingness. It's a vaporous cloud. You're arguing over the pile of poo, but the pile of poo doesn't really exist. And I'm saying that metaphorically, yeah, as an analogy. I'm not trying to suggest that the pile of poo in front of you doesn't actually exist if you're looking at a pile of poo. Although by now people get this point. This is something else I'm going to mention at some point. At what stage do we get past the caveat show and the having to, or from me personally, I speak from, I'm using the we phrase and whatever, but I know there's a lot of other people in this environment that do similar things and look at things in a similar way to me, in the sense of, you know, they try and be an objective and look at multiple sides of the argument and critically think about stuff. There are some people that do that genuinely, but a lot of people just look for what suits them and what suits their bias, and they cherry pick, and then they argue with each other about which cherry they prefer. Yeah. Anyway, I'm doing it again, digressing. So in this presentation of this anarchistic state of the world, supposedly, this chaotic state of the world, in recent times, now we're in the year of 2020, I'm saying recent times as in the last couple of weeks, there has been this build up of the current narrative that's meant to occupy everybody's thinking. This is the imperative narrative. You know, there's a lot of narratives out there that you're meant to be obsessed with, like the global warming. Oh, sorry, climate change. Get with the times, man. Global warming was so 5 years ago. You know, you got to use the current jingo, haven't you? Language control. But there's a lot of stuff going on at the moment. But the most imperative one is back to that beware of the Great War. The Great War is about to happen. It's just over the horizon. If something just happens, then everybody's going to be at war, and it'll be a global world war again. And of course, it's going to be at the end of everything. Caveat myself again. I'm not suggesting that that's not going to happen, or that anybody that's talking about that stuff is incorrect, or that they're a doom monger, a fear porn shill, whatever you want to fucking label them as, deviant labeling. And I'll get into that a bit more as we carry on. But what I am talking about is how that fear element is brought to the fore. Again, the current major fear element, the imperative, is currently the beware the war's about to happen. So, as we've often talked about on these shows, talked about for a long time, many hours worth of going over these kind of subjects, the system relies on fear. It is their major weapon. You know, we can talk about the technology of different weaponry and whatever, but when it comes down to it, the psychological weapon of fear is their ultimate arsenal. It is their primary weapon that they have relied on for all time, and that they have perfected many methods to utilize, to wield that weapon against people, both individually and en masse. And they've queued it up. They've been trained it into most of us. You know, quite happily include myself in that, you know, because my life has been a learning process as well, still is. they have entrained and implanted that concept into people so well that they can reiterate a certain phrase or even just show a certain symbol or image, a picture, like the classic mushroom cloud, and boom, that theory is brought back again to the people's thinking. And whether there's any reality to the possibilities of this kind of stuff happening is not really the point. It's just the manipulation of that fear element. Now they've got people by the balls. They've got them by the psychological hook, so that then the fear energy can be plugged into wherever they're scripting it to go to. So why the prince, the president, the plane and the plant? Yes, at the current moment in this second week of this 2020, the first year of vision, put it that way, supposedly, allegedly. It's episode 19 as well. I thought that was quite appropriate. We're back on the 19 again, number 19. We've had this build-up that's been going for a number of years now, where they've been playing out this constant script of we need to sort out the upheaval in the Middle East because there's these naughty nations that fund terrorists and do bad stuff, and their leaders are nasty people and dictators and blah, 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 laundry list of excuses, so that the neo-imperialistic action of intervading these countries, these nation states, can be whitewashed or blood-washed with those justifications, such that the populace at home still support the action or at least acquiesce to it. In other words, they don't try and actually stop the government taking action in some way. Yeah, well, okay, we don't really care about those people over there. Let's go and bomb them. Oh, you sent troops to take the oil. You stationed troops at the oil. Oh, that's all right then. At least my petrol will be cheaper in the coming months. It's that kind of attitude that is constantly being refueled, ironically, by the petroleum wars. Leaving out any questions of alternative energy, different energy sources, stuff like that, because the majority of the world's infrastructure is still based around petroleum and oil, and they're using that as an excuse, again, to bloodwash, to Google wash, to whitewash their imperialistic actions of building towards a singular world system. They present it as if it's chaotic, of all these nations fighting over resources and things like that. It's not really. It's a process of eradication of the past so that they can get people to agree with what they're building as the future. If we're going to burn down your old power station, then you have to agree to us doing it, because otherwise it's some form of criminal action, isn't it? I could have added in the fires in Australia as well, which is something I want to mention and come back to, but just to put it in at this point when talking about burning stuff down so that they can build something else. But the prince, I think that's, most people in the UK are certainly going to be aware of that at the moment, because you can't avoid it in the UK media. They've been talking about it for the past 3 days, maybe more, of Prince Harry and his princess. Is she really a princess? I don't know. Meghan are supposedly going to bow out of royal life and stop being senior official royals. In other words, they don't want to do the royal duties anymore, but they still want to get paid. Thank you very much. And there's even suggestion now that they're planning to move to Canada to get away from all the harassment and the racism and the whatever else reasonings of why they're going to go to Canada. There's an extra note here that some people might know, but I know the general populace is not really aware of. The crown, which is currently on the head of the Queenie Lizard Breath, but the Crown Estate is where the actual power resides, and that's controlled by a bureaucratic enclave. It's not really controlled by the individual that wears the crown. Yeah. But anyway, the Crown Estate owns easily half of the entirety of Canada. I think that it's something like nearly 60% of Canada actually belongs to the Crown Estate. And I say actually belongs to, this is all using their reference points. They've got a bit of paper that says they own it and shit like that. But the Crown Estate claims ownership of up to around 60% of the Canadian bordered country landmass. So them saying they're going to Canada is like them saying they're going to the Queen's Garden to retire. They're going on gardening retirement to the Queen's Garden. There's been talk in the past of how if they need to, the British monarchy will escape to Canada because they have that level of holdings there, and there's that amount of space, and there's that much landmass compared to population, etc. It makes good sense for them, supposedly, to do all that. So the Prince saying they're going to go over there and they're going to step back from the royal family, and the Queen calling for an emergency meeting so they can discuss what's going on with all this. Oh, the general populace, the UK populace, is being told that the monarchy is in turmoil and all this terrible stuff's happening. And but don't forget Andrew's a pedo, allegedly, or certainly associates with paedophiles. Destruction of the old way, the phoenix burning of the old order, the monarchy order, even that they have to burn it in the heart space of the populace who have been taught to revere these people as if they are their elders, their family unit. The Queen is presented as the mother of the nation, and you're supposed to love her as if she's your mother. How then do you burn that out of people? They have to visibly bring the royal family down. And again, a little caveat, I'm not suggesting that they're not guilty of this, that, and the other, and that they're just being portrayed and it's just propaganda that they're bad people. No, I do think that the majority of them are psychopaths. And they do things that are psychopathic mindset actions and activities and thinking processes. They are, as a general description, they are not good people. They are not your family. You should not revere them as if they are your bloodline elders or anything like that. But the general view of the monarchy is that kind of family unit of the nation. So the system has to erode that, and it has to break it down. And now we have a situation where, in many ways, the royal family could be said to be on its last legs, falling apart. There's even politicians in the UK at the moment saying, well, let's have a referendum on the royal family. Do we still need them? That kind of thing is now being put into the public consciousness for discussion and for talking points, and for when you're down the pub arguing with your drinking mates, you got to argue about whether you're for or against the royal family, and focus on that royal family. But there is this connection to Canada. And like I say, a lot of the population are unaware that the Crown Estate owns most of Canada. They're unaware that a lot of the indigenous tribes people there, the original people of that geography, get paid a yearly stipend from the Crown Estate. It's fuck all. It's a piss take. It's an insult. They get paid like $10 or $50. It's an absolute pittance. It is just an insult. But they still get that because the Crown Estate owns them like a corporation. They receive dividends from the corporation. So I'm thinking about this stuff over the weekend. We have this stuff coming out about the royals and Harry and whatever, and we did sort of mention it on Reality Chat on Wednesday. And of course, you've got the after results of the plane. That now brings me into the point about the president. And I just want to show this screen share. Screen share. Screen share. If we've got it on the right page, which I might not have, but we can quickly change that over. So we might get infinity view for a moment. But what I wanted to actually show is that. Come back to me, StreamYard. Yes, okay, cool. I just paused a news report at this point because I thought, I don't use Twitter. And for the sake of the point I want to make, I didn't want to go to the effort of going to his Twitter feed and looking for his actual post on his Twitter feed. It's covered here. And if people want to check the veracity of it, then you go to the effort of looking at his Twitter feed and seeing if it's there and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to utilize this. This is why the prince, the president, he's included in that sentence. Because after the situation has been supposedly de-escalating in the Middle East region, in the situation between Iran and the Western allies, because even though the USA, the American point is being put at the front in all of this, it is the Western allies, because they're not there alone. UK forces are there as well, French forces are there, other people, other nations, NATO members' forces are there. But he's the front man at the moment. He's the flag waver. He's the one leading the charge in this stuff. Yeah, even though he'll never be on an actual battlefront. But the point is, after this situation is supposedly starting to de-escalate, and the Americans made the point of how big and strong and fucking hard they are, and the Iranians have had their little shoot back, and they've gone, okay, we're done now. That's our retaliation. Let's de-escalate. Let's everyone calm down and calm down. Everybody chill out. Stop throwing shit at each other for a minute. But he then comes out with this rhetoric, which is almost verbatim the same rhetoric that they've used for Syria, for Libya, even for Tunisia, for the Arab Spring in Egypt, in Hong Kong, where they say they're with those members of the public that are protesting against their current regime. We support you. We respect your courage. We're inspired by your courage. These are all like code phrases to say, look, if you start rebelling, we'll support you. We'll come in and support you. You're interested in revolting against your current government? Have some funding. Would you like some people who are experts on organisation so that they can help you get groups together and decide what actions you're going to do? Engineered revolution, just like Utpour and the other groups that have grown out of that time period, creating revolutions to change the face of the current international global stage. The actors are being changed, but the script, the narrative, the general storyline is still ongoing. This is almost, like I say, a verbatim repeat of the same methodology, the same rhetoric they've used before. So even though in the general media they're claiming that things are being de-escalated, that Iran, that then brings us to the plane, Iran has taken responsibility for accidentally shooting down that Ukrainian airline. So they're agreeing that, we were naughty boys, we shot too fast, a bit of premature ejaculation all over the place, and we happened to shoot down a plane. Well, we're sorry, let's de-escalate. So they're being portrayed in the international community, in the international media, certainly for the Western allied nations, populations. They're being portrayed as being incompetent and dangerously incompetent, fatally incompetent, making silly mistakes because they don't really know how to fight the big boys game. They're not really on the same par as Mr. President Trump, Mr. President Fart. They can't compete with us. We've got a world theatre game down pat. We can do all this shit, no problem, without killing innocent people on a plane. Look how terrible they are. Whereas you've only got to look into the history of all these different nations, America, the USA, UK. There's incidents like that through our history. So they're just as, our governors, our politicians, our power player script writers are allegedly just as incompetent as these Iranian people that supposedly made a mistake and shot down a passenger plane. But the point is, they're continuing that narrative of, look, they're bad guys. They're the bad guys. Forget about the fact that we just assassinated one of their top generals, breaking international law. What do you mean we broke international law? No, we've got War Powers Act from 2003 that was given to us by the Congress. So therefore we were like, oh, hang on, mate. So you're admitting that you've been at constant war since 2003, and you're also admitting that your government is actually a state of emergency war cabinet because you've been in a state of war since 2003. So you're claiming that congressional agreement now gives you powers 17 years later to just arbitrarily assassinate a general or a politician or whatever, just, somebody who works for another nation state at the same time as you were supposedly inviting him to come and talk diplomacy with you and peace deals and de-escalation, and you took that opportunity to assassinate him. That's disgustingly despicable. Yeah, first thing you do is, oh, look, their people are rising. Oh, we support you. We're inspired by your courage. This is the same narrative again. I'm belaboring the point a little bit because the past few episodes have been trying to make the point that a lot of what's been happening in the past month, 2 months, 3 months even, is almost verbatim a replaying of the script from 3, 4, 5 years ago. So how many times do we need to keep being shown this same shit? To mention the plane, I'll sort of mention the prisoner. I think we can have enough of his chubby face on the screen there. Stop screen sharing, chubby face. Mention the president. The plane happened to be Ukrainian Airlines. Most of the people on board were Iranian. Some of them were citizens of other countries, which is why it had the high number of Canadians, because 63 were Canadian citizens, but a lot of them were of Iranian descent. They were second-generation immigrants to Canada, or first generation, but full citizens, things like that. But Ukrainian Airlines, and quite a few of their own people on board, you would have thought they'd be really careful about stuff like that, because the military in that area were not unaware that there's an airport there with civilian flights taking off. So you'd think they'd be extra careful about not mistakenly targeting airliner passenger jets in a conflict zone. But no, they're conveniently, coincidentally so incompetent that they happen to shoot down this plane. And over the last few days, I've been thinking about it's not an impossibility, obviously, but it certainly pushes that coincidental convenience such that the probability of it gets harsher and harsher and harsher, because it is so convenient to allow this narrative of now the Iranians look like bad guys and the Western allies look like they've been doing the right thing all along, because look at their regime, they can't even govern their own military to have a proper war fight, without causing innocent death. So why would they take responsibility of doing it? Because if it was a mistake and they are such bad guys, why wouldn't they just try and hide the mistake so that they could accuse America or one of the other allied forces of doing it? They could have easily made a statement saying something along the lines of, we didn't do it, we've got proof that we didn't do it, but we've also got proof that there were American jets in the area at the time, and maybe one of them shot it down. They could have pushed this, they could have kicked this can down the road and tried to turn the blame back on the Americans or the Western allies, and they didn't. It seems a bit maybe too honest. I know that sounds a bit of an odd observation maybe, but it's almost as if they're being too honest for their own good. If they're really in for this whole world war ending argument of one religion versus another, the great devout versus the terrible infidels, and surely they would have taken the opportunity to try and point the blame at their enemy. that made me wonder even more. Maybe the question of who was on board this plane and how this plane connects into that bigger picture of the different forces that are all being centered into this area of the world, Iraq and Iran. There's a few of the nations there that sort of overlap the borders, but that is one of the earliest academically accepted historical timeline version, but one of the earliest areas of human civilization. And all the world's nations are being drawn back to that area like it's a gravity well. That's another discussion as well about that kind of central geographic zone of the world, the naval and the energy center and all stuff like that. And other threads to do with ancient history and whatever. But so he's questioning the plane, Ukrainian Airlines. I thought, well, that connects it back to the Ukraine. I think I mentioned on Monday, you got that other kind of layer of connection with the Trump impeachment process that connects to investigating Joe Biden and Biden's son's connections into the Ukraine and the energy industry in the Ukraine. And he saw they're constantly using this threat of nuclear war. One of the arguments against nuclear war is that we don't need the nuclear power. We can use other sources of energy production. So therefore, we could do away with all nuclear energy production, which would also counteract weapon production, because the vast majority of nuclear energy production is a facade. It's a cover story. It's a limited hangout to get the public to agree to the production of nuclear weaponry, nuclear armaments. Because if you want to make a nuclear warhead, you need the output of stuff that comes from nuclear production systems, nuclear generators. They use either the waste or they have to use the same infrastructure to produce the high-grade uranium and plutonium, etc., strontium and whatever else that they then plug into the weapons. So if there was no nuclear energy industry, there would be no nuclear weapons industry. So these things all started to connect. And then I managed to catch up with it and watch it today. Jeff C put up a video talking about the Chernobyl, Ukraine and Canada connections. And that got me thinking, well, yeah, that is yet another connection there. It's almost like a triangular connection. You got Ukraine, which is butting up against Russia, which has been deliberately destabilized in that produced or manufactured revolution that I was talking about earlier, methodology, using that kind of methodology to destabilize that nation state and set it against Russia, right up against Russia's boundary border. And now we've got the situation in the Middle East, which is the main center of the general conflict, the global conflict, the World War III conflict that is happening. That's another point. People think the World War III is something in the future, that fear effect of they want you to think it's something in the future. No, it's happening now. It's just that warfare is not the same as it was during the Second World War. The technology has moved on from then. So if you expect to see lines of tanks facing up against it, it doesn't really work that way anymore. There will be at certain stages, there will be battlefronts like that, but that's not what is required anymore for there to be a global war actually going on at the moment. They don't need to have, all the militaries in one place with all their forces going at each other physically. The warfare uses a lot of different technologies and methodologies now. So anyway, so that made that further connection of the plane. And then, as I say, we get to the plant. What's in Ukraine? Chernobyl. If you hadn't noticed, Chernobyl recently, there was a mini-series that got done by, I think it was HBO and the BBC or something like that. Which I'll come back to that again in a second. The mini-series about Chernobyl and how they tried to entomb the reactor after it had failed and blah, blah, blah. That's up for a nomination. It was up for Global Globes or whatever it is, Golden Globes. That was up for a nomination. That connects to the recent media sensation that was Ricky Gervais, the chubby-faced twat, supposedly being a champion of the people, just telling them what they want to fucking hear. But Chernobyl also has been in the news recently quite a bit. Just showed this in his video, and he's doing searches for news articles, and you could see it was like January 9th, January 10th, January 12th articles in the news about Chernobyl. That's weirdly coincidentally convenient timing, isn't it? That they keep reminding us about this past event that happened in the 80s. But, remember how terrible it was when that nuclear plant went down. There was also, again, coincidentally, there was also a lot of articles about Fukushima doing the rounds at the moment. And then yesterday, I didn't see this until today when I come to look at the media feeds of what's going on. Yesterday, there was a false alarm from the, what's it called, the Pickering, is it the Pickering plant in Ontario in the USA? Just look back at my notes, I think I put, Pickering. The Pickering nuclear power generator. And there was one of those text message alerts sent out to people en masse. Something like 15 million people potentially could have received that message. And even though in the message it says that there is nothing that you need to do at the moment, just stay tuned into your local media, that alone is, again, plucking at that fear hook of people like, be scared. We don't know what exactly is going to happen. We don't know if anything will happen, but be scared, any minute, any second. So the fear hook, instant fear hook. And they've done similar with the Hawaii missile scare, and that coincidentally timed to go off around the same time as a lot of the actions they were trying to get away with in Syria at the time. So there's yet another nuclear plant connection, this time in the USA, where they're talking about possibly something going wrong with this plant, which is very close to a major city, Toronto, I think it was. I'm getting that mixed up with the other one. I might be getting that mixed up. Please go and check out Jeff's video if you haven't seen it. He covers it in there. But for me, the main point was making that nuclear plant connection, or the risk of some kind of nuclear explosion or fallout. Last night, I happened to catch the latest episode of the Doctor Who. I almost put it in a subtitle of "Who's Your Doctor?" and I was going to put in brackets "of fear." Who's your doctor of fear? And yeah, occasionally I get the opportunity to watch BBC, the way it is in the UK, as in the general BBC output, not the World Service or whatever they show to other nations, but the standard TV version of the BBC here in the UK. And for years, I've kept an eye on that particular TV show for multiple reasons. One reason being, ever since I was a child, I watched Doctor Who. I loved Doctor Who when I was a kid. I thought it was great. As the years went by, I became a bit more distant from it. And in more recent years, I've been able to look at it and ask a lot of questions about it and see many things about that show that demonstrate that it is one of, if not the primary propaganda vehicle that is used by the BBC. I think it's certainly in the top 5 as being the vanguard of the media, or the use of that media format by the corporation that is the BBC to insert propaganda narratives into the minds of the general populace in the UK. And what was the latest episode about? To quickly summarize it, now it's a woman, of course, in Doctor Who, because it's the change of the ages, so everybody's got to do a 180 of what they used to be. So now it's a woman, her and a team of people, her helpers, get transported to this other place that they have to figure out what's going on, usual kind of thing with Doctor Who. And lo and behold, it turns out there's these nasty creatures trying to kill people. And they figure out that what's actually happened is they've been projected into the future and they're actually still on Earth. But this is Earth after a major nuclear war and climate change, global apocalypse. And they use the word incorrectly, apocalypse, and they should say Armageddon, whatever. I'm being pedantic. But the whole storyline argument is that, well, the world ends as this terribly destroyed place full of all these nasty alien-like creatures that just want to eat everyone because we didn't do enough about climate change and there was a nuclear war. And the episode itself relied very, very heavily on the use of terror to portray the script, to portray the narrative that they wanted to present, that these alien creatures, it was very much like the Aliens movie. Even had the like Marines with guns shooting at everything and whatever. It was very like the Alien movie script. And even the creatures were very similar to the Geiger aliens from the movies, big teeth that stick out, they just want to eat you. But the production, the framing of the story was very much reliant on those kind of scare tactics where they'll have jump cuts showing the creature sort of growling into the screen and then people screaming, and it was deliberately geared to be as terrifying as they could get away with from mainstream BBC One targeted at a family audience production value. Much worse than they generally do. There's a few episodes over the years where they've gone, they pushed hard on that kind of fear button. But this one was very much on that trigger. They were pushing that trigger as hard as they could. I think some of the scripting obviously connects to the global climate change agenda, which is doing the rounds at the moment. That show is targeted at a family audience demographic, so they expect to be young children there. Connect that to the propaganda agenda to do with Greta Thunderbird and the whole climate change alarmism that's doing the rounds. You could then also talk about how that's relevant to the fires in Australia and other places at the moment. But that stood out to me even more so today when I was catching up on the news about today and saw about that Pickering plant and their false alarm alert. Absolutely playing the same narrative script again. Any minute now, folks, there's going to be nuclear war. World War III is going to happen any minute now. It's just over the horizon. If another mistake is made, look what terrible is going to happen. And don't forget how terribly dangerous nuclear weapons are. Like, remember Chernobyl? And if you're not afraid, here's a fake alert to keep you on your toes, to make you jump, to make you think it's going to happen any second. You're going to have to run. Tweak that fear. And on that toboggan sled ride down the hill of that fear as it's snowballing, what is it carrying? What's printed on the side of that snowball is that rhetoric that Trump, like I say, encapsulated in just that one tweet, because I thought that's the most relevant and direct way it's presenting itself. But if you look across the media in general, the conversation is on that narrative. Iran are bad people. Their regime are terrible people. They're despots. They're tyrannical. They're killing their own people potentially. I saw that in some of the news reports of them as a talking point, them worrying that the regime is going to start killing protesters and things like that. All this in that atmosphere of a lot of the Iranian people were out on the streets because of the assassination of their general. So they were partly mourning, but also protesting against what they see as the great enemy, or the enemy in general that's come along and assassinated their general. And then that energy is appropriated and rolled into this narrative of they're terrible people, they were a terrible government, a terrible regime, because look, they shot that plane down. And that is feeding that fake upswell of manufactured revolution, manufactured rise of Iranian spring. We're just after winter, the winter period in the Gregorian calendar. It's the beginning of a new year. We are rapidly accelerating towards the spring equinox. I don't like making predictions, but allowing for the logistics of how this has played out before, then more is going to start happening within the next couple of weeks in that area, such that they will portray the regime as despotic and that they need to do something about it. Initially, they'll play on the kind of narrative that they'll just support the local people. And if the people are protesting, then they'll support them in those protests. And that'll build and build, or they'll attempt to build that in the same way as they attempted to build it against Assad in Syria and didn't succeed so well because the methodology is starting to, or its believability is starting to fade as this campaign has been going on for so many years. They succeeded in Libya with Gaddafi. To the general populace, they portrayed him enough as being a bad guy, a crazy guy, whatever, that most of the Western allies' populations were quite happy for him to be killed and assassinated. Well, assassinated, not killed and assassinated. In a way they did, because they attempted to kill off his name, destroy everything that he'd done and accomplished and whatever. And I'm not saying he's a good guy. Caveat. That's a good point for me to mention. The one other thing. Hi, Graceful. Really graceful in the chat. Hello. I'm not doing too bad. Thank you. My throat's still a bit sore, but I got rid of most of my winter badness. And I never thought I should have said this when I had the quote, the Trump quote on the screen, because I just paused that from an RT video. Russia Today did a video article about that news about Trump posting, and that post was put up in Farsi. So they got somebody to translate it into Farsi in the hope that the people of Iran would see it in some way and think, oh yeah, Trump's on our side. Yeah. All this theatre game that they're doing. But anyway, something that I wanted to mention, and this is something that comes up every so often, irregularly, but it's certainly, I think, something that's very relevant at the moment in this environment, whether you're just on YouTube or on other platforms as well. It's all the internet, and in this internet environment, this stuff happens seemingly constantly, and we end up having to repeat ourselves constantly about this kind of thing. The caveat thing. I've got to a stage now, over the years, I've considered doing a show just called The Caveat Show, where every time I say a sentence, I then caveat myself for that sentence. Because, and I do accept that some of this would be coming from scripted narratives, agendas, basically. Some of it will be propagated by bots and trolls and agents and whatever that are deliberately putting this stuff out to just create confusion and argumentation. But one thing that happens quite often is I have to repeat myself about certain caveats that, for me, as far as I'm concerned, these things should be a standard given that you work from, a sort of like standard operating procedure of the way you interact in this environment and the way you interact with the information you gain from this environment. And that was one of the classic kind of supposed debunking or usual dismissal arguments that is used again and again and again. It's a fallacious argument in the first place, but it demonstrates how people are cued by emotions and bias to want to just attack the other person. Because like I was talking about earlier, in your little lives, what can you do but fight with the other little guy next to you? Because you're not capable of fighting the big guys, kind of thing. Anyway, the caveat thing. I showed a clip that was about that tweet from Trump, but I've taken that clip from an RT video, Russian Today video, For many people out there, one of the first things they'll say is, oh, that's Russia Today, that's propaganda, mate, that's funded by the Russian state. It's like, yeah. You mean you didn't think that when you look at any media in this environment? When you look at the Telegraph or the BBC or the MSNBC, did you not look at it and go, oh, who funds that? Is it state funded? BBC state funded. So why isn't there a little wiki note under BBC video saying BBC state funded? But you want me to constantly caveat myself saying, oh yeah, here's an RT clip, but oh, you know, the RT, we know they're propaganda, you know. Same thing with people referencing stuff in the mainstream media. This is a constant fallacious argumentation point. Or you can't reference the mainstream media, right? Because they're the mainstream media. Everybody knows that the mainstream media always lies, therefore you can't reference it. Can you not think for yourself? You are abdicating to an outside authority again, because what you're saying to me is you want somebody else to tell you what you're authorized to think. Because you look at one group of information, oh, that's from the mainstream media, therefore just automatically dismiss it all, because I only listen to the alternative media. So the authority for me is the alternative media. Don't you get it? You managed to break the connection of authority to the mainstream media, but you can't do the same to all information. You should be treating all information in the same way. And that includes me. Yeah, constantly that projection. I think I mentioned this Monday. There is I think this is a legacy. This is an artifact of the programming that we all go through via the state-controlled systems. Most of us go through. You know, there's a few people that grow up in an environment where they're not subjected to it, but majority of us get put through this fucking sausage machine, like Pink Floyd described it as, where our mind ends up a certain shape, and that shape relies on projection. So we project out onto other people shit that we shouldn't be, you know, and then we take the reflection of that projection as a presumption to then make a fallacious, biased decision over or conclusion over. People project onto you that you are their new authority. Oh, I don't believe in the BBC anymore. Now I believe in whatever channel it is on YouTube. It's like, shouldn't you be believing in the information, in the use of logic and reasoning and argument and evidence and repeatability? All these things are just tools that can help you to find truth or good evidence or good information, good ideas. They don't belong to any one group. Nobody has the monopoly over these things. They are just tools that you can use if you learn to use them and apply them. Now, I was partly inspired to say this because watching recently over the last few days a kind of to and fro argument for no real good reason between Max Egan and Carol, who runs the Kafka Winston World channel at the moment. She's mainly using a Never Lose Truth channel. I think it's Never Lose Truth 2. It's the common channel she's been forced onto because YouTube keeps shutting her or suspending her other channels. You know, this happens to a lot of people in this environment. They weren't exactly arguing, but there is a disagreement between them that to me just looks like it's out of miscommunication, which is being amplified and deliberately propagated by people in the environment, possibly bots, possibly agents, possibly just fucking assholes who like to stir shit up, but trying to set them against each other and saying, oh, he said that, you said that, he said that, you said that, you said that, she said. And then you have to do a video back. Oh, no, I said this and she said that and I said this. Creating argumentation where there isn't one there in the first place. I've listened to both people's point of view on the questions that they're supposedly disagreeing about, which was to do with the fires in Australia and the potentiality of DEW weapons, directed energy weapons, being used to either create the fires or to amplify them, stuff like that. And this is another long separate topic I don't want to go into now because I've already rambled enough. But to me, both of them were saying the same thing, in the sense of they were, like I've just been talking about, that caveat of, well, you've got to look at the evidence and you've got to try and corroborate that evidence and correlate it to other information sources and things like that. Don't just jump to conclusions, and don't succumb to a bias that makes you presume something is what you want it to be. In other words, cherry picking to suit your bias. So you think you see a laser beam because that's what you want to see more than anything, because then it will justify your paradigm. Can you actually correlate that clip of evidence so that you can say, oh yeah, there's more evidence to show the same thing. Look at all these other pictures that show the same. If you can't do that, then that bit of evidence goes on the suspicion pile, or not confirmed pile, however you want to term it. And both of them were basically saying the same thing. But others out there in this environment tried to stir the fucking pot up and create confusion, as well as putting off the viewer audience, the general populace, to give the populace the impression that people who talk about this kind of information or have these questions or have these ideas are just crazy tinfoil hatters that you should just dismiss and ignore. Whereas the reality is the technology to do what they're talking about has been around for decades. There's a massive pile of evidence to demonstrate how the weather can be and is being manipulated. And I feel, I'm quite happy to say from my point of view, you know, because I know people argue about this to the fucking cows come home and get milked and go back out in the field again. From my point of view, I've seen enough evidence to show that there is a war going on utilizing weather control systems, weather weapons, for want of a less controversial wording. Yeah, there is. And it's been going on for a while now, and it's been building up, and it's part of the whole big agenda. But again, as an example of the have to do the caveat, because otherwise some people go, ooh. I'm not suggesting that every bit of weather is manufactured or manipulated in some way. Again, like I said earlier, they don't need to do the whole ball of wax. They only need to do bits in important nexus points that create a change in the flow that influences what they want to change. Over the recent days, we watched, if you follow a channel called Suspicious Observers, and others cover this, he covered this about the chain of lightning that run up the east coast of America, which when you look at the rest of the layers of the weather satellite displays, you can see how there was these two major air fronts being forced to conflict at that point. And what they looks like they were doing was trying to drive an air mass up into the Atlantic, which happens to be forming a major storm here over the UK at the moment. Somebody did mention it in the chat. Was it Storm Brendan or something? I think I saw him call it. That weather mass was being pushed up into the Atlantic. And because there were two majorly conflicting fronts, because they'd been artificially formed, that meant the natural reaction of the weather system was like, well, there's got to be a major discharge here to release all that energy that's been pushed together. So what did you see? You saw a massive, long, major thunderstorm running up the east coast of America. That is, that's, I know people could say that a lot of that is ambiguous in terms of the not providing enough evidence to show that it's manipulated and shit. It's a big subject area. It's a big amount of data and information, and it's a big amount of history to do with the technology and what's actually been done with that technology. But I just mainly wanted to make that point about, as things are escalating towards major changes and occurrences, then you should expect that this environment is going to get more and more chaotic. There will be more agents deliberately tasked. And please remember, some of the nations like the UK have actual divisions of military dedicated to doing this shit now. that do nothing but sit on a base in a room with a internet access and deliberately make up sock accounts that they then use to fuck things up that we're doing here online in this media. They will try and amplify the confusion and the chaos as much as possible. They will really try hard to get people attacking each other because that amplifies the confusion, and you're not looking at the big picture because you're too busy fighting with the guy next to you. You're too busy arguing for elbow room or who gets the last biscuit on the plate. If we don't get past this shit, there will be no more biscuits at all. Yeah, so arguing over who gets the last biscuit on this particular plate that they've put in front of you. I want to know where the biscuit factory is, mate. Where are the fields of wheat that you're using to grow to fuel that biscuit factory? Anyway, yeah, I've ranted enough. So hopefully the main point makes sense. The prince, the president, the plane, the plant. We could also throw in the accidental ambassador, who just accidentally happened to be in the middle of a protest in Iran, encouraging the protesters to protest against their regime. Yeah. Sorry, go on, mate.
I was going to say, Cookie, it's the same script as you said. And the subversion side of it, subvert the nation, subvert the people in Iran, take over. And we see the same script each time. And that disagreement thing and gossiping people and things that are said behind the scenes, both politically and as you mentioned, just in general life, in the internet, how people gossip and, things are said. People need to start, like I say, growing up a bit. I think that's where we're at. I think, maturing a bit.
One of the things that...
and being adults and not being kept in the childlike argumentative, I want to be right state constantly. It's like, yeah, okay, we can move on from that one. But, it's all that's coming round again, like you say, the organised trolling and the Brigade 77 type stuff, which we know has always been there. And it's just, like you say, it's just getting more intense as time goes on, as they get more scared.
Well, a lot of people haven't done just that extra bit of inner work that will disconnect their ideas from who they are. So, their ideas become so important, they're a part of who they are. You've got to disconnect those two so you can change your ideas. Because the you, whoever you are, is, indivisible. It's always the same, yeah? The ideas, they change from week to week. I wanted to bring us back to that Trump tweet, yeah? Do you remember? And I'm sure that America was inspired by the brave people of the Marsh Arabs. Incidentally, the Gulf War that ended on February 1991, and the murder of thousands of unarmed civilians following the abortive March 1991 uprising. Now, that was after the Gulf War, when America said, okay, Marsh Arabs, we've pushed the Iraqis out of Kuwait, now we're going to invade Iraq. And they rose up, and Saddam put them down using partly the gas that was sold to them by the Americans. Yeah. So let's not make any mistakes about him having respect for the brave people of the Marsh Arabs. They actually set them up. Yeah. In the after effects of southern Iraq, Marsh Arabs cling to memories of culture nearly crushed by Hussein with the help of American gas. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's not forget that part of that's how much respect they actually have for the people on the ground there. Yeah. Not much at all.
If they haven't Google watched it, you should still be able to find the video, the news reports of wasn't Cheney, was it Rumsfeld? As far as I remember, Rumsfeld meeting Saddam and shaking his hand not long before all that shit went down.
That's right, and one of the people on his entourage was working for the company that supplied the chemicals, a Canadian businessman or something. Yeah. They originally came from a Canadian factory, I think, went to Germany and then went to Iraq.
Yeah. There's another little Canadian connection there. In the past, I used to think Canada was like one of the quiet nations because you didn't often hear them in the main news. There wasn't never many mentions of Canada doing this, that, or the other on the national stage. But in the last few years, they've been they've been there. And it makes me think again of that kind of the Queen's back garden kind of thing. I think they've been doing stuff in Canada, bubbling stuff away in Canada, ready for this time period, and now it's more of a major player again.
Yeah, well, people suffer under the illusion that domestic brainwashing politics is related to foreign politics, and it's not, because Trudeau's come right out and supported America. Yeah. And I said this last week. You know, they're all happy to accuse Trump of all different kinds of things. Yeah, but when it comes to a foreign military invasion, they'll be right behind him. Yeah. Even if he is homophobic, and he's not anti-Semitic, is he? He's the other way. Even if he is racist and homophobic, they'll still be behind him when it comes to the foreign invasions, organised by the Council of Foreign Invasions.
Yeah, that's another thing that I haven't seen that many people sort of going on about this point much. A little bit, but it's not really, other than the direct hypocrisy of Trump's own statements being shown. I think Corbett mentioned that last week. But there hasn't been that much sort of accusation that the only reason these things are happening at the moment is because of the 2020 election. There was a little bit, maybe a couple of weeks ago, and as I say, I think it was Corbett talked about Trump's hypocrisy of, he said exactly the same about Obama however many years ago, and now he's doing the same thing. Yeah? But the general sort of accusation that the only reason all these conflict zones are being presented as escalating and being major problems is because they're going towards the 2020 election in USA. I think most people have passed that argument now, because it's sort of like, well, that you could have used that argument if you'd had a length of time where most presidents haven't done this stuff, and then the ones that do it sort of stand out as like, obviously there was a major thing going on there because that president said we should do this, and it was all just about the election. It would stand out then as being something you would reference as being an alternative method or a different method being employed by somebody who possibly could be some kind of tyrant. But what I'm saying is like, this is so ubiquitous to all of them, and not just the American situation. This is true of almost every nation. Their leaders do this same shit. So it's not an argument. Because this is just the way it is. It's not that they're doing it just because there's an election. They're doing it just because they want to stay in that position. They all do. And they all do it in one way or another. Obama wanted to do Libya and whatever, and Trump's doing or trying to do Syria and Iran. But they've all done it. Bush did it. Clinton did it. And like I say, it's the same in the UK. Whenever we're getting close to an election, you get a lot of these kind of conflict things get brought up. Often in the UK now, in recent years, they almost always rely on the judicial system. Crime and criminality at home is usually the number one, or certainly the top three of the government's concerns, and they always promise to deal with crime and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but they're certainly getting on the bandwagon with Iran, aren't they?
Yeah.
The same script. I've said it before, but there's like I say, just blatant subversion. Just they've been at the same stuff. Russia do it, America do it, Britain do it. Everybody does it to their own people to get them into line as well, and to get them into what they want you to go, what direction you want to go in, where they want to push you. And these are techniques that are being used, being talked about. We mentioned him before, Yuri Bezmenov. Go and check that guy out. Yeah. He does a whole talk. We've mentioned him a few times on here because, again, it's people telling you the truth about how governments work, how they manipulate their own people, and they do it through all the means we say, through entertainment, through all your movies, films, scripts. Everything's a script. Everything's getting you to think a certain way, to act and behave a certain way against certain sorts of stimulus that's put before you. And that's how it works. And they're doing it in Iran. It seems to be paying off because we're seeing it all bubble away now, and we're seeing this sort of infiltration occurring on the ground. We're seeing more and more like I say, agents in there and been probably there for decades and planted there for generations. Who knows? You know, these guys work on big time scales, and you know they have time, as we know with Syria. You know they will have all these proxy wars. And like you said before, we're in a world war anyway. You know, in a sense of what they're doing, how they're trying to manipulate us and across the planet, how they're trying to control all of that. And we're just stuck in the middle of it, saying, well, you know, come on, guys, we need to, you know, like I say, stop the voting process. Look at a different system. You know, don't feed the beast. You know, surround the beast, and the beast will die. You know, we're feeding it constantly, and that's where we're as a society, as a humanity, need to start thinking on a bigger picture scale, because this is these guys just doing what we're allowing them to do. Like I said last week, you know, your own conscious objector. You know, you need to, you know, people need to start to do this, and like I say, their reaction to it is to send in the trolls, to send in those groups that are active right now, shutting down channels, creating disharmony, causing cognitive dissonance in a lot of people, and that's what we're seeing. So,
and I think what else that they're doing, that they're feeding a conveyor belt of intersectional wedge issues to divide and conquer, which is played out on their social media platforms, which have been set up to engender conflict for clicks, views, and control. So it's a case of pick a side or think it's little old me with my learned helplessness that can't do anything. Double barrel bullshit and false dichotomy. And ultimately, for me, all this bickering is a distraction. The climate change, the World War III, all of it is humanity is headed towards merging the sexes, merging with the animal kingdom through genetic editing, and with the AI and the neural network connectivity. A technological singularity. The end of humanity as we know it, with a whimper, not a bang. That's what I think all of this fucking bullshit is a distraction from.
Yeah, spot on. And with a post-orgasmic whimper, because in a not just a physical orgasmic sense, but in a psychological orgasmic sense, people will be entertained to death. So their death will come as they expire from the last orgasmic expulsion. You know, they'll be so drained of energy that they'll just expire from being entertained to death.
And to be distracted in that fashion, much like the trending tab on YouTube. Yeah. Gwyneth Paltrow's minge-scented candle perfectly encapsulates, illustrates exactly what the control system wants to usher society. A dumbed-down avenue of vulgar, screaming for attention, face-tattooed, vapid offerings, which is choking up the airwaves in absence of real value, talent, anything of creative worth. And this repression, this kind of expression is essential to maintain their control.
Yeah. You're joking. I was making a joke out of grabbed pussy perfume the other week because of all the perfume adverts over Christmas, Trump Bath, the new fragrance. And now they got Gwyneth Paltrow's pussy, the new fragrance from Jesus Christ. Yeah,
they must have been listening into you.
That's what it was.
It brings in a level of occultism as well, because obviously depending on and I know this is just sort of like analysing a wizard's fart in a way, because we're talking about the bullshit that they're presenting, or I am anyway, but how was the candle actually made scented? Is the implied suggestion that she's been fudging herself with the candle and then she puts the candle up for sale? You know, because I think that's for a lot of people, that's the suggestion of the whole thing in the first place, when it comes up as like, oh, you know, we've got this for sale. And so how did you make it scented, love? Oh, well, wait, how do you think? Yeah. Whereas if it's an imbued wax, if they basically just come up with a wax with an added scent in it, and they sort of given her the nudge, like a agent or whatever, said, look, we can put this on the market, put your name on it, and obviously it's not really you and your bits, we're just selling tat with your name on it, you know, using that sexual implied connection to hook people in with their weirdness. But the reason I'm questioning that is because if the wax is actually being imbued with something that genuinely has connections to female menstruation or the genital area to be able to put out a scent, then that is in effect creating a votive candle that for the majority of people, they wouldn't comprehend what they're doing with a votive candle. And we may very well see this come up in the next few days or weeks where, based on her announcing this, they're going to start having people doing like candle ceremonies where, oh, let's get together and burn one of Gwyneth's candles and see what it smells like and talk about it. And that's creating sex ceremonies using votive candle magic that the populace would have no concept of.
It also comes left field at the idea of them taking your DNA. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. So, because a lot of people, I think, when you talk about their DNA, yeah, is like, you know, it's like I said about the chip at one point. Yeah, getting it actually inserted into you is a kind of rape, and they've got to break that barrier down. Yeah. So, same with having your DNA. You know, they've got to break that barrier down. So it's kind of, you know, it kind of links into that. Actually, I'm not sure it would be the actual smell of any kind of female, because that is almost impossible to make. Yeah, they've tried, and if they could, they'd already be using it in shop entranceways.
Yeah, it's personal.
Yeah,
Everybody has a slightly different aroma because it's to do with their body chemistry and their bioelectrical field and stuff like that. So you can't just emulate. You can get an approximation, but you couldn't, not without actually, chemical bits of the person involved.
To paraphrase the Kings of Leon, her sex is on fire.
Yeah.
It's literally because I think those the real chemicals actually involved, they break down very quickly. Yeah, and it's very difficult to, even to find the basic one that is the same for everybody. Because if they could find that, they'd be using it already. Yeah, they'd be spraying it in shops as you walk in to get you excited to buy something.
When you're in the supermarket, they'd add it to the smell of freshly baked bread. You imagine that? It'd be like freshly baked fanny. Here, guys, let's go and shop here. I don't know why I'm really enjoying shopping in this shop, but I love the aroma. Fanny buns.
Did you see the guy in the Whole Foods in America the other day? A tramp walked in and he was just trying everything, man. Yeah, and the shop staff ended up laughing at him, because he was really blatant. Yeah, going around with little buffets and trying a bit of this, bit of that. I thought the Russian one was the funniest. Guy goes into the shop, goes to the vodka fucking rack, grabs a bottle of vodka and just downs it in one before they can grab him. By the time they get there, he's on the floor, man. Literally, have to drag him out of the place.
It's almost like the new version of bum fights, because that was a bit of a controversy towards the end of last year, with people going into stores and doing things like licking the contents in a jar or spitting into a jar. Or the one which I just thought was silly was some woman burping at things. Okay, I know some people have fetishes and whatever about stuff like that, but now you have this homeless guy demonstrating how you can walk into a store like that and just graze, and the store assistants are probably just going to laugh at you. It's in a way it's encouraging criminal behavior, but at the same time it's also encouraging that kind of clickbait media. Yeah, they want people to obsess on outputting that kind of content. Simple, short, sensationalist, dumb, whatever else, the age of stupid encapsulated into a 6-second video clip, shit like that.
Let's all have a laugh at those less fortunate.
Yeah. A voyeuristic circus maximus and the freak show effect. Let's all laugh at the crazy guy getting beaten up by the police because he's eaten all the walnuts that were on display or some shit like that, yeah. Getting people as well to video themselves in every situation like that. That's part of it as well. They want to convince everybody that every moment of your waking and even sleeping life, every moment of your life should be digitally documented, preferably as in a video format on social media so that everyone else can use it voyeuristically to get their jollies out of in some way.
Your digital footprint and your carbon footprint, much like the original sin of religion, cancer on the planet, and you have to atone for.
Well, that is in effect the basis of certainly the main religions. In some way, that is the basis of all of them, is that you are in the wrong place. And if you follow the code and follow the rules and do everything that the priests tell you, then you will be allowed entrance into the correct place. So in other words, the transition, of moving on to beyond the veil to the next realm. All of them use that shit. And now they've just translated that method to, I'll use the word scientism. I'm not one of the people that thinks all science is evil or whatever, but I do agree that there is a religious cult mentality to scientism, that people will just outright believe anything a scientist says to them, even if it's provably incorrect and blah, blah, blah. They've taken that religious methodology and turned it into a version that suits and supports that scientism mentality that they want a lot of people to adopt.
There's a religious zealotry in this climate alarmism, which is all too obvious.
Yeah.
I think also with the guy in the shop, grazing and that, they want to break that barrier of judging other people to train people for the social credit score. Because when you've got that social credit button and you can put somebody else's social credit down, a lot of people would avoid that. They think, well, it's not my problem. Maybe other people like this guy. I'm just, and people wouldn't want to keep putting each other down like that. So they've got to be trained into doing it. Like, it's a good thing. It's good for the community. Yeah, that you're letting everybody know that this person over here is, you saw him grazing. Can you imagine how your score would go down if that was you in that shop? Everybody would be getting their buns out, put his social credit score down, put it down, put it down, put it down. Yeah. No wonder he ended up homeless and having to graze.
Farting in a lift, -2 stars.
It's not easy to get the whole population to inform on each other. It's not easy, huh? They have to be shown how to do it.
They've introduced a digital panopticon for us to have that sort of self-policing and grassing each other in, that sort of social scoring. That's the next step for it all.
I think more people are more aware of that now, maybe. I know sometimes I'm overly optimistic, maybe. Sometimes I'm overly cynical, overly balances it. But I think more people are aware of that. And to me, the unpleasant thing about it is more people are willfully ignorant. So they're becoming aware of the fact that Facebook tracks everything they do, was one example, just using one platform as the example. They're aware of it, but they've got to the normalized point of thinking where it's just like, oh, well, I don't care, I still want to use it. So they're willfully ignoring the evidence and the methods that are being used against them. The pleasure they've been trained to receive from whatever it is, the device or the platform, outweighs their sense of danger. Short-term thinking, they can't see the big danger that's in the long-term process. They look at the short-term danger possibilities and they don't see any danger. So they're like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter. I can post a video about some bomb that I saw in the supermarket.
It's privacy again, isn't it? Yeah, well, it's privacy. That's the thing, isn't it? I mean, they've taken that and thrown that out the window to a certain degree. Everyone, like I say, with privacy, I mean, we all we have some privacy. That's why people had a safe. They built safes, didn't they, and things to hide things from you. They didn't want you to see. It's like sort of, we're sort of inherently sort of designed that way to a certain degree, to have like a diary or something we can lock away and just have our own personal thoughts. And we think, well, they're just for me. It's like someone getting into your head, like we say with this new technology sort of stuff as well. You know, it's like they want to know your thoughts. They want to know everything about you. It's kind of really creepy. That's why I speak out against it so much, because it's so creepy. You know, people are just people, you know, and why do they want to know everything about you? There's nothing I want you to know, you know, in that sort of way. You know, it's like, it's just madness how, you know, we, like I say, this generation have been, they sort of don't realize that. They've never had a world without the internet. That's the other thing. We did. So we had other things, you know, we would collect things, we'd have record collections or book or whatever now. I mean, that seems to have, you know, for the new generation, younger generation, everything is streamed, and, you know, they don't own anything per se. You know, it's all on the Apple iPhone or shop or whatever. It's a digital version of something. It's not a real tangible object that you can hold and look at, you know.
I find it quite amusing, but again, in an unfortunate way, when a lot of the, I say younger people, it's not always just young people, and that just feeds the ages and bullshit. I've met a lot of older people that do the same kind of thing. I think partly because they're not as aware of how the technology operates or whatever, but people will say like, oh, I bought the latest album from so-and-so. And I'm thinking, oh, you bought a CD? It's like, no, I just bought it on iTunes or whatever. So in other words, mate, you didn't buy it. You rented it. Because you look at the terms and conditions, you do not own those music tracks. You are allowed to make use of them as long as your account is up to date, in good standing, any membership fees are paid, any requirement paid, blah, 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 blah. You don't own them. But they don't seem to equate the two as different things. It's all like it's been merged into this mush of meaning. And they think because they've got a device in their hand that will play the tune when they ask, that means they own it. It's not the same thing.
I think one of the reasons they've been changing schools is because what Pete was saying just then reminded me. I mean, I spotted that at school. You know, there are some kids who are like, you know, they want to come up and know all your business, and they want to know everybody's business, and they'll tell you about somebody else's business. And something inside you, even when you're a kid, says this is an empty person. You know, they're just busybodying in everybody else's business because they've got nothing of their own. You know,
it's
something
like
is wrong with the person. Yeah.
When you find a nice canyon or other similar geographical place where you get a nice echo, that person is like the canyon. They're empty until somebody else puts something in there, and what you're hearing from them is just the echo of other people.
Yeah, and the echo of themselves on their own scares them. So,
the empty can rattles the most.
Just to stay with the music for a second, the digital degradation of the shitty MP3 qualities, which pass for music on the digital downloads as well, which is all part of the agenda for me, you know. And that's without even getting into the content of the music these days, which for me is anti-music in a lot of the cases. You know, music used to bring people together. Now it's all about, look what I've got. You know?
Well, I tell you what, I was listening to that Billie Eilish the other day, one of her tracks, and I see a parallel here between the ASMR. Yeah, is that the right acronym? Yeah. The ASMR and music like Billie Eilish, because back in the day, a song used to be a song. You know, if it was say a female, you could kid yourself that she's singing to you, but that word "singing" tells you that somebody is reading out, you know, the words, and they are singing them, which is not a conversation. Now rap sort of changed that a little bit, because rap came along and somebody was talking perhaps to you, and the better rappers, they were actually saying stuff that was interesting, that could wake you up a little bit. But now they've reached the point where they're not singing, they're talking. That Billie Eilish, that is the voice of somebody you're laying in bed with, talking right into your ear. It is close, it is physical. Yeah, they're not objective anymore. They're not somebody else somewhere else. They're actually in your fucking ear, talking to you, creating that sort of physical connection that wasn't there in the past. It used to be objective.
There are recording. I was going to say recording techniques. It's not so much a recording technique. It's more the production techniques to do exactly that, like deliberately. I don't know. I don't think I've heard any of her songs apart from like a 10-second clip of one. So I don't know what the song is that you're referencing, but by the sound of it, no pun intended, they're doing that kind of stereo mixing technique, production technique. So yeah, it sounds like the person's literally right next to you in your headphones.
Yeah,
Whereas
mumble
if they wanted to, they could make it sound like they stood behind you or in front of you or whatever.
Yeah, I think they call it mumble rap because it's not singing. You know, they're not actually singing notes. Yeah, they're talking or mumbling the whole time,
Yeah.
which turns it from a song and singer into a conversation. Yeah, if you allow it to.
There's a guy on YouTube called Thoughty. Is it Thoughty 42 or something like that? He's done a really good video on how music has been systematically dumbed down. Well worth a watch if anybody's interested in it. And then you've got this shitty auto-tune, you know, the human voice that's merged with the technology, and it's just terrible, you know. Like, when are we ever going to hear another Whitney Houston? When are we ever going to hear another Aretha Franklin? You know, like it's never going to happen anymore in the mainstream.
I use a different form of auto-tune. It requires a certain balance of frequencies into your larynx.
Well, I tell you, I sold this story a little while back here, where I'd had a cold night, yeah, in the winter, and I go to the cafe in the morning, yeah, and I'm shivering, and I noticed that the music, yeah, it was Cabello's Havana, yeah, Havana, and it was, I could hear the subliminal just underneath the music. You can't really hear it unless you put on a beat generator at 6 hertz. And so I went and looked it up. That's the frequency of not just being cold and shivering, but rapid eye movement. So you've got deep sleep at 4 hertz, rapid eye movement at 6 hertz, which happens to be the same frequency that you shiver at when you're cold. Yeah. And it was also the backing subliminal of this track, keeping people in a daydreaming state of mind. Yeah. So that's there as well.
I'm going at a little bit of a tangent, but it's still connected to frequencies and stuff. I'm curious if anybody's seen any more news about the Schumann frequency. Supposedly it's been going up recently, creeping up recently. But I've seen similar rumours before over the years. So I just wondered if anyone has seen any actual news or any more definitive kind of acknowledgement that it's changing. I wondered if that had something to do with the amplification of sensation that a lot of people have been reporting. Yeah, sometimes it's just that people reacting to the news media in general and stuff like that. You know, they feel a bit agitated by what's going on in the news events. But other types, like I've mentioned it before, every so often, you get this sensation of energy changes or energy shifts that are not really related to what's going on in the news. And I know you mentioned it on the other show, and you said it again before we come on air. We've had that major conjunction going on as well recently. So
yeah, with Pluto and Saturn conjunction.
Yeah. Thinking from the point of view of things like the volcanic eruptions recently, but other things going on with the biosphere of the planet, the weather changes and whatever. You know, I know I was talking earlier about kind of weather technology stuff, but like I said then, again, caveat myself, I don't think they're able to control everything about the weather. And a lot of what they do seems to be trying to cover up or hide, obfuscate the changes that are naturally happening because of the solar cycle changes, yeah.
If anybody's interested in frequencies and their effect on music and tones and all that, just research cymatics. I know it probably goes without saying to a lot of people listening, but if there isn't anybody out there that hasn't heard of it, research cymatics and see the effect that has.
I'll type it in the chat. CYMATICS. It's spelt with a C, cymatics. It's you could sort of describe it as being like the physically observable effects of frequency and resonance. So in other words, they'll get a speaker or a tone outputting device, a horn or something like that. They'll put certain frequencies or tones through it, and nearby or on top of the speaker, they'll have a plate with sand or some other material on that will vibrate following what's coming out of the speaker. And if you play certain tones or certain patterns, certain frequencies, you get certain patterns form in the sand. So that's what I say, observable frequency effects.
Sacred geometrical patterns.
Yeah, that's, I think, where it more leads to. If you look at it in isolation, it could just be an interesting quirk of the way we observe patterns from frequencies. But no, you add it into everything else, and in particular the electric universe theory, as it's been developing over years. Now it's more defined as the electric universe theory, but I don't want to give them all the credit. You know, the groups out there that do purely that, like the Thunderbolts Project and others, you know, they didn't come up with everything about the electric universe theory. Some of it is stuff that's been known for a long time, but has been relearned, remembered from a long time ago, and the information is gradually coalescing and amassing to form what is becoming the electric universe theory. And it's, I think,
well, you've got all the indigenous stuff, you know, that they're trying to hide, you know, the ancient knowledge, and trying to cover up.
Some of that in the Australian fires recently. I saw on some of the news reports that certain sites, old ancient sites, Aboriginal sites, have been either destroyed or damaged by the fires there. Yeah, sometimes you have to, I say sometimes, but it's worth questioning at least whether some of that is done deliberately because they want to get rid of information. You know, changing history by erasing little bits of it here and there. That as well, talking about frequency stuff. I know this is a bit of a tangent and a bit of a tenuous connection, but I watched Really Graceful's last video that she put up. She said this is going to be the first part of a series she's doing, talking about that kind of rewriting of history, you know, losers' history. I think that was the title, Losers' History. But talking about that kind of thing, about certain things getting erased. And at the moment, not just at the moment, but certainly with the technology we've got available to us, we have the opportunity to look at some of these things where you can still find bits of energy and go, don't forget about that before it disappears completely. Because if you allow them to rub out little bits here and there, to erase bits here and there, and the general populace's general knowledge gets gradually changed over time, then eventually that little bit of information that could be useful to us has just been completely erased, gone, forgotten.
Well, you think about next year's 20 years since 9/11, and that the generation and all thing, and the official story and narratives are pushed into the mainstream education system, and that's what people are told is what happened. And that's so long ago. How can you be so crazy to think it was that? You know, because again, it's just how we've been fed our own history. When we went to school, same sort of thing. You taught modern history from, was it 1910 to 1959 or something? I think there was a period we covered, and you found out most of that was propaganda. So yeah,
I can't see it for me. I think I had one of my old textbooks up on the bookshelf, and it says something like 1910 or 1913 to 1950. So yeah, it's right, and that's all they want us to know, because that's a short view. Nicely short view.
Yeah, because when you're 20 years old, you know, 20 years ago to you, or that sort of era is forever ago, if you remember when you were young. You know, it does. As you grow old, you know, you go through phases of learning and understanding about yourself and how you grow.
Anybody over 30 was ancient.
Yeah, exactly. Your thinking changes as you grow older and more wiser, let's hope. You know, most people. But yeah, that's how it works. That's how it should be working, in a balanced, you know, harmonizing way. But no, they invade it, they hijack it, they do all the things we've talked about, and they create these lost souls. You know, people who don't know. You know, they're just again being fed by the system and all they know and all they were born into. And anyone else who maybe has slightly got a different point of view, the system's doing its best to, you know, keep that in the distance, in the background, Yeah.
One of the other sort of notes on that, when I was watching Gracie's video, and she's talking about the guy who invented a car that runs on water. I can't recall it. It's me talking about remembering this stuff, and I can't recall his name. But that was the main point of it, talking about the dominance of oil and petroleum, and the fact that people have invented other kinds of engines, other kinds of energy production over the years, but they just get disappeared, and their information gets lost. But one of the things
on the shelf, and
I posted as a note under a video, because she mentioned the beginnings of the Ford motor industry and the connections to the big oil industry and stuff like that. And I put a note in saying, if you look at the actual history, it's there. It's not hidden history. You just have to look a bit, because they're not generally upfront about this kind of shit. But Ford actually designed the original Model T to be made out of hemp.
That's correct.
Hemp resin. It's a kind of plastic. I'd call it resin, but other people would call it plastic. But it's a kind of plastic that's as strong as steel, weighs a lot less, and is fully biodegradable. And that, combined with, he was going to make fuel as ethanol out of some corn, but also hemp. He'd bought up the rights and the production of large amounts of hemp fields, and the whole initial production line was geared to be that it could all be done in a fairly local area. And in effect, it was from farm to production line to on the road. Yeah, they grow the hemp, they turn the hemp into this plastic and the fuel, and that makes the vehicle, and then the vehicle is,
Maybe
they don't mention that in general history. They just bang on about how Henry Ford invented the production line and mass production and all that shit. In other words, they took his idea of a fairly enclosed system that was biodegradable and sustainable, and a lot of words that are now uncomfortable for many people. And he designed this system to be quite self-contained and not very pollutive or destructive. But instead, they turned it, the kind of ideology of what he presented, they turned on its head and said, he's the first one that made production lines and mass production. Therefore, you dislike the world of pollution we're in now. It's because Henry Ford invented production lines.
Well, actually, that was Taylorism. Well, Henry Ford took advantage of it. But the thing about Henry Ford, he also said, if the ordinary man knew how the banking system was set up, they'd hang us all from lampposts. So obviously, he was a bit pissed off about what they did. Yeah, why he changed the idea. But that was one thing.
His encounter with the oil industry at the time, with the Rockefellers, wasn't it, being supported by the Rothschild.
He was lucky they didn't knock him off, But it was interesting that they shut down the hemp because you could make alcohol out of it, which led to prohibition. Or did it because the prohibition also brought in the highest mafia families, the highest heads of the mafia families were actually now working with the government, I think. And I think that prohibition was their reward, for for working with government as opposed against it.
That again connects to the Taylorism, because it was a lot to do with the strike breaking. They needed the mafias to keep the factories producing and break the strikes and stuff like that. So they made a deal with them, and their reward was the prohibition, basically.
Yeah, so it was a double whammy. It stopped the hemp, and it brought the mafia on board as well.
Yeah. But I wanted to mention it now because I was thinking, I know we've been talking a lot about the general kind of dark, doomy stuff that's going on at the moment. I know a lot of people still have difficulty when I start talking about how World War III is already happening now, because they like to think that it's not, because then they think there's still, everything's going to be normal or good or whatever. And so, please don't take it over the top. I do think World War III is happening, but that doesn't mean I think we're all doomed and everything's doom. No, quite the opposite. If you can realise that this is most of what is being pushed across the planet at the moment is them trying to enable and carry out this change of age, this change of paradigm to take us into this new system dystopia that they're trying to set up, or have mostly set up. That's why so much conflict, because they have to break down and destroy all the old world structures. Well, yeah, old world as we understand old world structures. So the old paradigms of government, monarchies, economies, production, even social interactions, and the way we live amongst each other and interact with each other, because that's been taken to the virtual space. Yeah. So that's a lot of why all the major conflict of why the World War III is going down. So if anything, if you're able to see that, it shouldn't make you more despondent. It should be the other direction, because hopefully it will help you see how a lot of this stuff is engineered and acted just so that they can get away with making changes that they want to make. It's not that they have any genuine justification in reality to do what they're doing. Yeah, when you can see the illusionist trick, you're less anxious about what's going on, about whether the woman is really being sawn in half or not. Yeah, the fear is removed. Doesn't mean you can no longer appreciate the entertainment value of the illusionist, but now your fear has been put back into your control. You have control of that fear now. Somebody else is not jerking you along like a puppet, using your fear against you. So don't see it as being all doom, gloom stuff. It's not. It's quite the opposite. And we shall see as the next few weeks develop, see if it plays out similar to Gaddafi, and whether the Ayatollah is further portrayed as being some kind of major bad guy that has to be dealt with. If they start dropping hints at regime change, then that's often the next sort of bit in the script of that method. Is, they'll talk about, oh, we don't want to take over the country, we just want the government to change and those bad people to go away. We'll see how it goes, and I'm interested to see what happens with the royal family stuff. Are they actually finally going to try and move the UK, the British Isles on from that old world paradigm of the monarchy?
No, Piers Morgan can stop it.
Maybe he wants them to come and live with him, so the Queen can make him a marmalade sandwich.
He's been having rants on the morning show. How dare Harry and Meghan abandon the poor Queen like this? Are they trying to bring down the royalty? How dare them? How dare them?
Good stuff. I noticed Pete had to drop out. He has to drop out early because he's got work in the morning, doing his slave commitments. He's got to earn a crust. So I will wind it up at that. So thanks everyone for joining in. Thanks everyone in the chat. I'll scroll back up, see if I missed anyone. And thanks to the guys for joining in and chatting for a bit. And thanks for joining. Thanks for letting me rant for an hour or so. Dotty's there, and Cannabis Space Life Form. Hello, mate. Thanks for joining in the chat. And Misty Ernst, hello. I'm scrolling down quick. I'm looking for the names that weren't in early when I was shouting hello. Really Graceful was in. Hello, Grace. Thanks for joining. And Neo Dog 1, hello. Authentic Human Programming, hello. Spy Kids from 1984, yeah, definitely. There's a lot of youngsters being sort of programmed into that spy mentality kind of stuff now. It's better to be on the winning side, double plus good, all that kind of shit. Anyway, digressing again. I think I've said hello to everyone in the chat that's there. And thanks to all the people that are tuning in after, or just sat back listening quietly and not typing in the chat. Hello, hello, hello. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for tuning in for a couple of hours or so. We'll be back on Wednesday night with the reality chat on Peter's channel, on the reality chat channel. And then, should be back next week, hopefully, if my voice doesn't break completely and things get shut down. Thanks again, folks. Take care. See you again soon. Click the button.